Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hello! Welcome to episode 26. You're not going to regret downloading this one. So how have you been since last week? I'm currently stuck at home with my daughter who may or may not have COVID. She's basically fine now, but won't take a test, so we're having to assume she's positive. Anyway, I hope you and those closest to you are doing okay at the moment. So have you been doing any making? This week, I whipped up a pair of pyjama bottoms for myself. I used some cotton pontel jersey in this gorgeous chartreuse colour. I bought it last year intending to make it into a skinny layering top. However, I've already made 3 skinny layering tops lately and I realised I don't really need a 4th. So I had a rethink about what the fabric could be. For the jammy bottoms, I used the Juno pattern by Tilly and the Buttons from her Make It Simple book. I made a few changes on spec based on what I know about my body and what I've learnt about how the fabric behaves and wears. They've come out really well and they're super comfy, and a great thing about it is that I can also pair them with one of the Pontel layering tops to make a kind of pyjama set. Also, I decided this week to challenge myself to get to the bottom of my mending and altering pile by the end of January. It's all spilling out of its container that it's meant to live in, and it's making our dining area, which is also my sewing area, look really messy. So I'll be working through that whilst I gear myself up for my next big project, which is going to be a much needed pair of jeans. So I'm proud to announce that over the last week, I've continued to smash it in the meal planning department. Subsequently, Mr. Sozo still hasn't bought any lunch or snacks from the convenience shop yet this year. As part of the whole reducing food waste thing, my goal is also to spend £100 less per month on food than we were spending in 2021. And at the end of January, I'll do a tot-up to see how that went and report back. Right, let's just get stuck right in and talk about today's episode. I know I often say this, but I really had a lot of fun recording this one. I got to chat with Colorado-based maker Eliu Hernandez, who makes incredible quilts and other awesome items, predominantly with the denim and other materials that he reclaims from old jeans. Eliu has developed an approach to deconstructing unwanted jeans that allows him to harvest as much as possible to reuse again, including the belt loops, pockets, leather patches, and even the thread. I loved nerding out about denim with him. So even if denim isn't your jam, I really think that this conversation is going to help you think about reusing existing materials on a whole new level. I know it's had that effect on me. We also discussed how useful portable sewing projects are, what crafting is like as a new parent, and a whole bunch more. As always, there's a bunch of related images and links in the show notes, including where to buy the amazing little zine he created in collaboration with quilt maker Zach Foster. I'd love to hear your reactions to this episode, so please get in touch if you feel the urge. Enjoy! Thank you so much for making time.
Oh, thank you. This is wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
So first of all, can I just check, is it Eliu? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Correct. Eliu. Yep.
Brilliant. Oh, there's so much I want to talk to you about. So I discovered your Instagram feed a couple of months ago now, and I was just blown away because I just saw this incredible denim work, and I'm obsessed with denim as well. So I was like, this is so good. Can't wait to get into all things denim. But first of all, if you wouldn't mind, would you mind introducing yourself? Tell us who you are, where you are, and what fills your days. Is that okay?
Yeah, my name is Eliu Hernandez. I am in North Glen, Colorado, just north of Denver.
Right.
Just at the foot of the Rocky Mountains. And during the day, I work as a chiropractor, I work as a husband, and I work as a relatively new dad. We have a little girl who takes up the vast majority of our resources.
Congratulations. How old is she?
Thank you. She just turned 1.5 years old before Christmas.
Wow, that's so full on, isn't it? When they start to move as well, you're like, oh no.
Yep.
Oh, bless you. Wonderful, thank you. So I would really like, just to get a little bit of background, Could you fill us in a little bit about your like relationship to sewing and quilt making? Like, when did it begin?
Sure. My mother taught me to thread a machine and to sew a straight line when I was very young. And it was kind of interesting. It didn't really excite me in a big way.
Yeah.
But about 15 years ago, I was learning how to make bags for a friend of mine. And she wanted a hip bag, across the shoulder, sits on the opposite hip.
Yeah.
She wanted a hip bag with a lot of pockets. And after looking at all the stores, we couldn't find anything that suited her needs. So I took some materials and I started playing around. And after a while, the design was the half top part of a pair of pants.
Oh.
They were khakis, they were corduroys, but they had pockets. And that was part of the design. And one leg of those same corduroys was enough to provide 2 straps.
Amazing.
And so I had this much left over from the other leg of those same corduroys or khakis. And my wife says I'm a hoarder, but I consider myself a collector. And I think we're saying the same thing in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
But I couldn't throw those extra pieces away. So I would stack them and stack them and stack them. And we got to a point where where my now wife said, you have to do something with those or I'm going to do something with those.
Okay. And that might involve the bin.
Exactly. And so at that point, I had been wanting to piece together some kind of a quilt for a while.
Oh.
And my sister's wedding provided a good opportunity to try that out. And so I put together a bunch of khaki, and they were brown and tans and those kinds of colors for a beach Mexico wedding, and it was great. The finished quilt turned out really well.
Yeah.
It went over really well. But for me, that process is what really stuck with me. That's part of what I enjoy the most, that process, that meditative quality about sewing and designing and then quilting by machine or hand stitching, and those kinds of things are good for the busy brain that I have. I remember thinking, I want more of this. And it was new, it was raw, but it's evolved. It's been over 10 years now.
Yeah.
But it's evolved into something that uses reclaimed materials, but there's little things that have changed for sure.
Yeah. So you started using some different fabrics. When did you get into denim? Because that's your kind of primary source of fabric at the moment. Is that right?
It's a healthy, bordering on unhealthy obsession for me at the moment. So to answer your question, yes, that's my primary material. And I started that, I don't know, Zoe, because I think it was somewhat of a transition. It was from khaki and shirts, and now I use almost exclusive denim and bed sheets for bagging a lot of these quilts.
Awesome. So I'm sure you've been asked this loads of times, but what is it about denim and reclaimed jeans that really appeals to you?
It's versatile, it's durable, it holds up, and in my humble opinion, it's beautiful. And a lot of that beauty comes from the color, obviously, but also the character, the texture. There are areas of faded jeans and there are areas of non-faded jeans. And sometimes that contrast is just really, really wonderful to look at, to work with. I incorporate the worn areas. Sometimes I'll incorporate other aspects of those jeans into finished pieces.
Yeah, you're massively preaching to the choir here. Massively. I love it. I've got your little, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but the bit that you said in there about the pocket shadow, I love the pocket shadow when you take the back pocket off and you get to see the gradient of the kind of the original die is at the bottom and it kind of grades up kind of nearer the pocket opening. Oh, it's so pleasing, isn't it?
It is. And I say this about different parts of the jeans and different parts of the process, but that's my favorite part. And then I look at something else and, that's my favorite part. And that's my favorite part. So I have a lot of favorites.
Yeah. And when there's like the lap seam or the leg seam, and then you take that apart and then you open it up and there's that fresh bit of like virgin denim. That's so, it's like you're like a little archaeologist, aren't you, at that point? Like, oh,
Yes.
this is the original thing.
Yes. I get excited even talking about that, right? That's the first time that bit of denim has ever seen the light of day.
So true, like since the factory, yeah.
It's interesting to think about it that way.
I've been thinking about your incredible quilt, the one that you entitled Waist Knot, that's made from loads of waistbands and jeans. How many waistbands went into that? And like, where did you get them all?
I have 4 finished waist knot quilts.
It's 4.
And there's a series, and I have more waistbands to contribute to more projects like
right.
that. Yeah. To answer your question, how many waistbands? The largest one took 50 waistbands for the top, and I used another 4 waistbands for the edging, for the binding.
Oh, cool.
And I have smaller versions of them that have taken approximately 25 waistbands to complete the same.
Wow. So how do you prepare the waistband to use? Unless that's a secret.
It's not a secret. I've talked about it. I've posted about it. This incorporates a couple of different procedures, but part of it is harvesting that thread. And when I harvest thread, it loosens up the waistband so that it just peels apart off of the top of those jeans. You have to prep the jeans. You have to remove the belt loops and the patches and the labels, but that's a big.
Do you remove the button?
Yes. There's a special pair of pliers that makes that job probably less than 10 seconds to
really? Is it the angled diagonal cutters?
It is. Oh, you're reading about it, aren't you? Yeah.
I've never figured out how to remove rivets or buttons. I've only just kind of ended up cutting round them or something.
And that's what I used to do as well. These angled pliers are what have worked best for me, and they make really short, simple work out of that task that used to take a long time.
So let's talk about the jeans themselves. So where do you get 50 pairs of jeans?
At a time. Some of them are my own clothing. I've thrifted a lot, and so I've gone around and shopped for jeans that way. But even thrifting at a discounted price, that number adds up in the way of cost.
Oh my goodness.
And so most recently, I've been accepting donations from people.
Cool.
I've become the person that people give their jeans to.
Right.
And if it's 1 or 2 pairs of jeans because they've blown out the knee or they've blown out the crotch, that's wonderful, and I'm happy to take those. I've had people give me bags and boxes full of jeans in the past, and one of my sources was a volunteer at one of these thrift stores, at one of these charity shops. And I asked her, I said, hey, what do y'all do with these jeans that you can't sell?
Yeah,
for
they must get
reason,
low.
for style, they have a lot. And she said that she didn't know, but within a couple of days, she brought me the first large trash bag full of used blue jeans that they couldn't sell. And I was thrilled.
That's such a win-win, isn't it? Because they've got all these jeans they literally can't sell, but obviously don't want to stick in the bin or something.
Right. And since then, I've had 5 or 6 of these enormous trash bags from the same person as donations. And just this week, Zoe, I've gotten 2 packages in the post of denim makers who don't use the waistband. So they've cut out all the pieces that they need, and they've left me with the pieces that I use.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. What for you is like a really good pair of jeans to use? What would you not use? Like, how do you feel about jeans that have got some stretch content in compared to 100% cotton?
I've grown picky.
It sounds like you've got the luxury of being picky.
When it comes to the denim itself, I prefer 100% cotton. I avoid the stretch for a couple of reasons. One, it shifts a lot and it makes things a little more difficult to work with when I'm putting things together. I've had challenges, and I've used stretch the more I want to avoid it.
Right.
I try to focus on 100% cotton. When I get donations, I'll look at the tag. When I do my shopping, I'll look at the tag. To answer your question a little bit more, I'm looking for denim that's not so heavy, because as you put things together, it gains a good amount of weight.
Sure, yeah.
And so some of the lighter denim, I like denim with character. I like sometimes working spots that are faded, that are worn, and sometimes there's holes and tears.
How do you deal with the holes and tears?
I try to include them.
Brilliant.
I mean, if those tears are so big that they compromise the finished piece, then I can't use them. But when I remove rivets or the main buttons in the waistband of a pair of jeans, that leaves an opening, both the front and the back, and then you have the buttonhole on the other end of the waistband. More recently, I've been trying to incorporate that character into the finished piece, and I will do a little mending, sometimes by machine, sometimes by hand, just so that you can't stick your finger into the middle of the quilt. So to prep, I'm harvesting the waistband, I'm ironing those waistbands so that they become a single layer. It becomes a little more easy to manage, and then I'll repair some of those worn spots by machine or by hand, and once I get those ironed and mended, I will trim them because it's tough to match up the width of those waistbands, which ends up being about 4 or 5 inches, but you have to match those up so that they line up and sew well together.
Right. So let's talk about this. I've got in my hand, obviously no one can see it, but so you had a fantastic collaboration with quilt maker Zach Foster, and it's all about how to prep jeans for using for other sewing projects. And I love this so much. It's so good and it's so informative and it's so cute. You must be really pleased with how it came out, no?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited about how it came out. Zach Foster, if you don't know him already, is a wonderful artist, a wonderful maker.
Yeah, he's incredible, isn't he?
Quilter. He's incredible. And we have a mutual friend, Heidi Parks, who is a wonderful maker, a wonderful artist, and does really, really amazing work. And the two of them were talking, and he was mentioning an idea about making one of these zines with this kind of information. She and I have been friends for a while, and so she mentioned my name as somebody who knows about deconstruction of denim and put us in touch. And it took us a few weeks of emails and text messages and bouncing back and forth, but that's what we finally came up with, and both of us were super, super excited about the results.
Amazing. Wonderful. I'm going to put a link to it on the show notes, because if anybody is interested in using jeans in any way, or even if they're not, because it's just a lovely little thing, I definitely think they should get it. So I know that it's not only quilts that you make with denim as well. I've seen that you've got a variety of things on your feed, including like zippered pouches and even a teddy bear. So when you're working with denim, are you sewing it by hand? Are you sewing it by machine? Is it a combination? Tell me how the construction goes for you.
It's often a combination. Denim is a material that you need to pack a punch to get through a single layer. I've got areas of quilts that are sometimes 4 layers or even 6 layers deep where the seams meet. And so I'll use a machine for that. More recently, if I'm quilting, I like the quilting by hand, and that's one of the ways that I can reuse some of this reclaimed thread. And so to answer your question, yeah, it's a combination. I have a teddy bear that I've been working on for more than 2 years now, and it was supposed to be a gift for my daughter on her actual birthday, and then it was supposed to be a gift for her on her first birthday, and then it was supposed to be a Christmas gift. Now I'm not sure when it'll be completed. But it's one of these projects that I've been working on. I want to use 100% reclaimed materials, down to the thread that I'm using to assemble, the thread that I'm using to accent, and then obviously the denim for the structure of the bear. And eventually I'll have reclaimed materials for the stuffing of the bear as well. But I don't want to use a single new material for making this bear.
Oh, that's such a beautiful thing. You're making a real heirloom. So are you stitching it by hand, like the actual seams?
So I'm stitching it by hand. And part of the reason I brought that up is because when I harvest this thread, it leaves zigzaggy, kinky kind of a shape to the thread. And so working by hand is usually what works best for that type of
Yeah. Well, let's go into it. Let's talk reclaimed thread. As you know, recently I made an episode about thread options for garment sewing, and I spent ages researching that episode, probably far too long. But it literally never occurred to me that an option might be to reclaim thread. I mean, maybe not for using with machine, but certainly for any hand stitching elements, or I don't know, or embroidery possibly. Okay, talk to me through, if you wouldn't mind, what you've learned about reclaiming thread.
Reclaiming thread is a wonderful resource. And for someone like me who has itchy hands and itchy brain when I'm not working, it's also one of those things that becomes meditative in its process. It was by accident, so I think a lot of other people know about this already, but if you pull out one end of a chain stitch, those chain stitches are what make up the seams of a waistband or the inseam of a traditional pair of men's jeans. If you start at one edge, you can, with satisfying sounds and pops and everything, you can pull out these long lengths of usable thread from some of these seams. And it's a wonderful procedure.
I've done it once or twice, and it was probably the most fun I've had in my adult life.
Yes, and it is. But getting that thread out is satisfying in so many ways.
But I never thought to keep it. I never thought to use it.
And I've thrown away plenty of thread, Zoe, and now I regret a lot of that. But I've learned to harvest some of that thread. It's become a wonderful resource for finishing up some of these quilting by hand, and for accenting other things, not just denim pieces, but other pieces as well.
Because it's such a gorgeous colour, and the combination with the denim is, such an iconic colour combination, isn't it? It's so lovely that you're then bringing that back into your work. So do you prepare the thread? So once you've harvested it, do you wind it round a reel or anything? How do you store it?
Yeah, there's a little bit of prep work after you've pulled out these kinky lengths of thread. The first thing I do is, after pulling it out, I will give it just a real firm stretch.
Right.
And that does two things. One, it tests the strength of the thread, because this thread is as old as the pair of jeans.
Sure.
And there are areas that have worn differently than other areas.
Yeah.
And so I test it, and if it breaks, then I won't use it in my projects, or I'll use it differently in my projects. And the second thing that the stretching does is it takes a lot of those hard kinks out of that same thread. And so once I've done that, and I've tested it, and I'm okay to use it, then I will wind it around a spare piece of cardboard or a business card, or I've got empty spools that I've used, and I'll wind it up by hand, and I'll store it for later use.
Amazing. So that thread, is it polyester? Is it cotton?
I think it's nylon, because it's supposed to be really, really durable. When you look at an old worn pair of jeans, oftentimes those seams are there. They're holding things together, even when other areas have worn down.
That's so true.
Considerably.
Yeah, I had a sense it was probably synthetic. Wonder, have you tried ironing it?
No, but I think I'll start, or I'll at least experiment with it.
So as you were saying, you try to reuse as many elements of a pair of jeans as you can. So out of all the elements that you harvested, what have you found to be the trickiest elements to find uses for?
There are a couple, because as a collector, I have hundreds of back pockets from those jeans.
So beautiful.
Thousands of belt loops from those jeans. I have pounds and pounds of zippers and rivets from those same jeans. Hundreds of spools of this thread. One of the trickiest is the belt loops.
Right.
The belt loops are sometimes double and quadruple layered, so that they hold up for what they're supposed to be used for. And so I've started unpicking some of those belt loops with the intention of getting a flat piece of material to use in something else.
Cool.
I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to use it.
Do you get that nice kind of gradation of colour like you do with the inseam?
There's some gradation. There's some hard transitions from dark blue to faded white, or holes. I mean, belt loops are some of those areas of a jean that take the most abuse.
Sure.
And so sometimes you'll get virgin material, and sometimes you'll get worn and broken and holy material as well.
Right. So that's still a work in progress, what they are going to become. So I saw that you reclaimed the zips, which is amazing. And you've been making these really beautiful and very useful zipper pouches. What about the back pockets then? What have you been using those for?
The back pockets, they've been piling up. I want to make a quilt out of only back
because
pockets.
There's so much variation, isn't there, in the top stitching and in the shape?
Yes. And that's part of the fun of trying to figure out a design for these. I don't know if I want to cut out perfect rectangles. I don't know if I want to incorporate the pentagon-ish shape of the pocket. I don't know how, but they've been piling up, and I do want to do something with them soon.
That's so exciting. I'm sure I saw on Instagram a while ago, a woman was wearing a pair of dungarees that were made from back pockets, kind of somehow pieced together. It was incredible. I need to find that image because it was just so good. I love it where you can see, as you say with your phone, like where you can see if somebody always has their wallet in a certain position and stuff. It's so nice. It's almost like a little kind of story, isn't it, about its former life?
Absolutely. I look at a pair of jeans, I'll look at a waistband, I'll look at different parts of a pair of jeans and wonder who wore it, what kind of work, what kind of activities were these used in good, or were they used in evil? Has a bank or a store ever been robbed in a pair of jeans that I'm using?
So ubiquitous. They must have been used for all of the above.
All of the above, right? And so there's a lot of life in these clothes that we use, and sometimes I sit and wonder about it.
Yeah, it's like, talk to me, James. What have you been up to? What about the leather patches? Because I know that you've got one really cool use that then you use within your actual sewing.
Yes, the leather patches are wonderful, and it's another piece of these jeans that often gets thrown out or set off to the side. I've been using leather patches as thimbles.
Amazing.
I've been sewing little cylinders that fit around my finger, and that's what I've been using to hand quilt reclaimed thread into multiple layers of jeans. I've tried the store-bought leather thimbles, and they work for a short amount of time. I feel the end of the needle a little more because those leather thimbles they're very thin. And so these leather patches serve as a tougher thimble for the work that I'm doing. I've got leather thimbles here. I've got leather thimbles at the office. I've got leather thimbles in my pocket and in my bag, and I have access to those whenever I need them.
So good. So with your donated jeans and with your reclaiming of thread and with your self-made thimbles, your quilting practice must be like pretty low cost. So what do you find yourself spending money on relating to your sewing practice?
The cost in money is lower. The cost in time and effort and thought, that's a little higher in the way of cost.
That's such a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that there's layers to that.
That's the compromise. And it's not even a compromise. That's the trade-off. It's a little more inexpensive to work with donated materials, but it comes at a different price. So yeah, the costs for me, I've tried to minimize that for different reasons, but also I don't want to buy too much new. And that's where I'm trying to be a little more sustainable in the sewing practice, in the quilting practice.
It is easier, isn't it? Just to like, do you know what? I'd love to make a thimble, or maybe it hadn't even occurred to you to make a thimble, but it is easier just to order it, isn't it, on the internet, and it be arriving in a couple of days. So there is a luxury of time that kind of gets wrapped up in that. Yeah, I need to think about that.
As new parents, our concepts of time, the amount of time that we feel we have has decreased significantly. And part of the beauty of working with denim the way I do it is that I can have a pair of jeans ready to deconstruct, and I can start doing that as I'm watching our daughter, or as we're on a car trip, or when we're doing other things. I can be picking apart a pair of jeans, trying to harvest a waistband, or I can be hand quilting towards the other end of that same process. I can be hand quilting I need to do something. Well, then let me set that down for a few minutes and tend to that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
one of those things. I think one of your guests, Louisa, was talking about that same kind of thing, that this might be one of the easiest ways of making something. Not the easiest, but in the way of time and availability of time.
Yes,
One of the
because you're not
easiest things
tied
you
to
can
a
do.
machine necessarily.
You're not tied to an outlet. You're not tied to a machine. You're not tied to certain tools. You can take it. It's pretty easy to transport.
Yes, completely. Yeah, because that's what she was saying, wasn't it? It's like the time it takes to sew this seam takes longer by hand than it does by machine. But the opportunities you have to sew when you're doing things by hand is expanded. So in a way, you've got more opportunity and more opportunity for enjoyment as well. And being a parent, it's so stressful, isn't it? And there's so many things going on your mind and you're juggling a million things and a million thoughts. But to have that thing, that meditative thing, or that thing that's just yours, it's such an important thing to give to yourself.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that I have to be extra careful about is where I set my things down, because as this little one has gotten more mobile and taller in size, I have to set my seam ripper and my needles and my things a little higher and higher and higher.
Completely. Well, I now have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I can let you know, this is your voice from the future. You can bring them down again soon.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
You don't have to go continually finding higher and higher spots. They're literally on the ceiling. They can come down eventually.
Good. I'm happy to hear that.
But also as well, that noise, like presumably your daughter takes multiple naps, and if you're sewing by hand or you're unpicking by hand, you don't have to worry about, is this sewing machine going to wake her up? Is it going to interfere with her nap?
All these things that we have to consider.
Yeah. No, who knew? Who knew going in, eh? Oh, so you've already given us so many fantastic tips in relation to reclaiming jeans to work with. So do you have any additional tips maybe about sewing more sustainably, perhaps more generally?
Yeah, experiment. And sometimes when we use that word or that concept of experimentation, we think, well, that's just a source of additional waste. But when I talk about experimentation, if you're shopping at a thrift or at a charity shop, or you're looking at your closet full of things that you do wear and then full of those things that you don't use anymore, experiment with those materials. That's a wonderful source of getting some of these materials that if you come out successful with the procedure or with the final piece, wonderful. And if you don't, you can reuse that material for something else. You can unpick it.
Yeah.
You can do something to where it hasn't been, I don't want to use the word failure or anything like that, but if it doesn't come out successful, you can do something else with it without the stress of thinking that you have to throw it away or that you spent this much money on it or some of those considerations.
Because ultimately, if there's something in your wardrobe that's not getting used, it's just sitting there, it's just gathering dust. It's not doing the world any favors by retaining its existing shape, is it? If it's literally just not being used, yeah, why not? And then if you're having fun and experimenting and playing around with existing textiles, you're not buying virgin textiles as well, aren't you? So it's kind of win-win, really, isn't it?
I think of it as a win-win situation. And you have to be a little more flexible in color or the print or considerations like that. But I open up myself. I try to let myself be a little more flexible with the colors or with the types of material or even with the shapes of materials. When I take apart a pair of jeans, I come out with shapes and sizes that lend to a little more creativity when it comes to the design or to the finished product. And one of the things that I tell people is that most quilters or most makers come up with a plan and then they get their materials and their tools to accommodate that plan.
Yeah.
I often come at it from a different point of view where as I harvest the materials and they come out with interesting shapes or sizes, I often let the materials dictate the design or the final piece.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of a difference in the approach. It adds beauty, it adds character, that unique factor. Nobody else anywhere has that, right? For someone like me, I enjoy the process often as much or more than I enjoy a finished piece. And when people are including process videos or process photographs of what they're doing, it excites me in a different way.
Brilliant. Oh, this has been so good to talk to you. Thank you, Eliu. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Zoe. This has been really, really wonderful. I've been looking forward to it for a long time.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!